Hi guys, want to demonstrate a couple of possible things that we can do with Pixlr that you may not have thought of at this point. So the website I'm looking at here, same as before, pixlr.com/e. That's the Pixlr E editor. And you should, in theory, see the file that you started working right there. I'm going to go ahead and just click that. Now, what I've done here is exactly what most of you guys turned into me already. I have 3 spheres going off into the distance. Okay. If you look over here at my layers, you'll notice that I have a separate layer for each sphere and for each shadow. That is sort of important for this to work properly. It's not 100% necessary, but it does make things a little bit easier. So what I'm going to demonstrate here is how to alter, turn that down a little bit, how to alter the colors and the light and dark of your different layers, and then also how to add a texture overlay to something, which is something that we've done in Photoshop before and is really helpful for us to be able to do here in Pixlr as well. So first off, as things get farther away from us, they should be getting lighter in the distance. So it appears that they're actually sort of blending into the atmosphere as they get farther away. We call that atmospheric perspective. So here is my first layer I'm going to adjust. It's this guy right here. It has this sort of middle distance sphere on it. Very easily, all I have to do is go up here to the adjustment menu, and there's a bunch of options in here. Probably the easiest one is just brightness and contrast right there at the top. You might also want to use either curves or levels. I like levels personally. You could also do brightness contrast, but I'm going to do levels. And it gives me this little histogram, which shows me the dark and light areas of that particular layer. Couple of ways you could adjust this. You can adjust the midpoint here. That will make your overall object appear with more dark values or more light values. Another option, which I think works a little bit better for atmospheric perspective, is this black point right here. If I slide this over to the left, this will make it so that the darkest part of that layer corresponds with wherever I'm pointing it right here. So in this case, the darkest part of this layer is going to be about 50% gray or so. I'm into that. Hit apply, and we're good. I'm going to do the same thing to the ball that's off in the distance there. So I'm going to go to adjustment. I'm going to go to levels, and I'm just going to grab this dark point right here and slide it way over to the right. This one I want to be even lighter than the other one. So I'm going to put it about right there. Now, already you can see that really makes a big difference. It really looks like those things are retreating into the distance. I'm going to do the same thing with the shadows. So I have 3 shadow layers. It really helps that when you click on them, it sort of highlights those layers so you can really see which ones you're working with. So I'm going to go to the middle one here. I'm going to go to adjustment, levels. And again, grab that black point, slide it over to the right a little bit. I guess I should put it 50%, same as the other one. Apply. And then the one way back there in the distance, adjustment, levels, and way over to the right. I click off. Now you can really see. I'm going to just go back here in my history. So here's what it looked like before I did that. Here's what it looks like after the adjustments. I can also change colors. Pretty simple. If I want to change the color of one of my layers, click that layer. Up here under adjustments, you'll find all kinds of fun stuff, such as temperature that sort of tints the colors a little bit warmer or a little bit cooler. Hue and saturation essentially allows you to pick any color that you want for that layer. If I click the little thing here that says colorize, it will allow me to literally make that sphere any color that I want. Okay, in this case, I'm just going to leave it as it was, but you can adjust it if you like. I want to talk a little bit, really briefly, about textures. So the next thing I want to do is I want to add a texture onto this ball right here, so that it looks like it actually has something on it instead of it just being a smooth, almost looks like a cue ball. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to apply a texture to that layer. This is something that is, again, super helpful to do, and is going to really make our essentially allow us to put anything on any object. So site that I like to use for textures is this guy right here, textureking.com. Works really well because the textures are all free. They're really nice, high quality images, and they're categorized by the type of material they are. So you can do concrete, wood, stone, rock, metal, whatever. In this case, I'm going to go with stone. I want to sort of make this look like a planet. And find one that I like. There's a whole bunch of them in there. I'm going to go with this guy for right now. When you click it, it opens it up like that. If you click it one more time, it'll open up the large, high-resolution version of that file. And I'm going to save it. So if I right-click on the image, I'm going to choose Save Image As. I could also copy it and then paste it into Pixlr, but in this case, I'm just going to save it. So Save Image As. I've got a folder here on my desktop already set aside for this purpose. So I just click Save, and there it is. Now, when I go back to Pixlr, the way that I put that in Pixlr is actually over here under my layers. Right now, I can't see the bottom of my layer menu over here. Go away, don't need that. If I scroll down, go away, don't need that. If I scroll down here, you'll see that there's some buttons down here at the bottom. But if you're scrolled up to the top, you don't see those buttons. Kind of an annoying thing that happens, but not that big of a deal. If you scroll down, these allow me to move those layers up and down, but this little plus right here allows me to create a new layer. When I click that, it asks me if I want to make an empty layer, which is just nothing, or an image or text. In this case, I want to use an image because that's what I'm trying to put in there, an image. So when I click image, here are the files that I've downloaded. This is the one that I want right now. When I click open, it'll pop that image right into my document. Now, at the moment, it's humongous. Okay, it fills up my entire picture. Pixlr makes this really easy. I can shrink it down to whatever size that I want very, very easily, just like so. And you can adjust that at any time. So for right now, I'm just going to put it right there. Now, if I look at my layers, you'll see here that I have this layer that has my photo on it, this layer here that has my large sphere on it. Except I can't see it, right? Because this layer is on top. So whichever one is on top is the one that you're going to see. If I want to get rid of it so I can see the other layers, all you got to do is click this little checkbox right here that says visibility. And when you click that, it goes away. So the layer is still there. I can turn it on, I can turn it back off, but when you turn it off, it allows you to see what you're doing. Okay. So I'm going to select my ball layer here. Here it is. And what I'm going to do is I want this texture to appear inside the ball. Okay, so I don't want all this stuff out here. I want to only see the texture where the ball is. Okay. In Photoshop, I would do this using either a layer mask or what's called a clipping mask. Pixlr doesn't really give me that option, unfortunately, but there is kind of a trick that I figured out that I can use to make that texture only show up inside the ball. And so here's what I'm going to do. So it's important that I have my texture layer above my sphere layer. Okay, so layer 8 here is the sphere. This layer with this funny name is my texture. Okay, and all I have to do is make sure I have my sphere layer selected. Now you'll notice there's nothing else on that layer. Okay, so this doesn't work if I have a bunch of other things on that layer. It needs to be just the sphere. Okay, and I'm going to come up here to my select menu. This is something new. We haven't used this before. So right up here it says select, and I want to choose the option that says select pixels. Select pixels, and what that's going to do, it's going to make an active selection of all the pixels that are on that layer. So in this case, I only have the ball on that layer. So when I click select pixels, it makes a perfect selection of exactly just that shape and nothing else. Okay. Now when I turn my texture back on, you'll see that I still have that little selection right there. Okay. So now what I want to do with that selection is I want to remove everything outside of that selection. So I want to get rid of all of this stuff. Okay. So the easiest way for me to do that is to come up here to my select menu again, and then I just click invert selection. Okay. I can also press Control I. Invert selection will select the opposite of what's currently selected. So now everything outside the circle is selected. So if I grab my eraser now, and let's make my eraser a little bit bigger, so it doesn't take all day, and I start erasing, you'll see it's erasing all the stuff that is outside of the circle, just like that. Okay, so if you missed that, go ahead and rewind the video so you can see how I did it again. It's really simple. It's only a couple of steps. But if you missed it, rewind the video, watch it again. So now that I've done that, I can come up here to my select menu and say deselect. Now I have no more selection. So now I have a nice cutout of exactly the shape of my sphere, but unfortunately all I see is the texture. And what I really want to see is I want to see through that texture so that I can still see the color or the lighting on my sphere underneath. Okay, so there's a couple of different ways to do this, but basically what you're going to do is click this little menu right here, these three little dots, and that brings you to the blending settings for that particular layer. So this is just like in Photoshop. We would have either by double clicking the layer, you could look at the layer style, or right at the top of the layer palette over here in Photoshop, you have blending mode and blending settings. Well, guess what? Pixlr has it too. So transparency just turns that layer up and down as far as the opacity is, so you can see through it, and that kind of looks not too bad. The other option is also to play with the blending mode right here. These should look very familiar from Photoshop. They basically do the same things. I don't really expect that you remember exactly what every one of these does, so you can just go through and try them out. But multiply makes everything look darker. Screen is going to do the opposite. It's going to only show the lighter areas, make everything look lighter. Overlay is kind of a happy medium. It shows a little bit of each layer, shows the darkest parts of the background and the lightest parts of the background, but it covers up kind of the gray areas. Darken will only show the darker parts of your texture. Lighten will only show the lighter parts of your texture, etc. And you can kind of go through here and play with them until you find one that you like. Some of them are going to have a very funky effect on your picture, and that's not good or bad. It's totally just up to you. And you're just going to want to go through these and find one that you like. In this case, I'm going to go with multiply. And I'm just going to turn the transparency down a little bit so that I still see my texture, but I also still see the shape of my sphere underneath. Okay? So I want to show just one more way of getting that texture into Pixlr. So let's say I have another texture that I like. Let's say this one. And again, this one is just from the same site, from textureking.com. Here's a texture that I like. So I can save it, and then place it in as a new layer. Another option is to copy and paste it. If I right click on my picture in my browser and just say copy image, this is Google Chrome. If you use a different browser, you might have a slightly different wording for this, but basically it's copy and paste. So copy image. Now when I go over here to Pixlr, in this case I'm going to put my texture on my second sphere back there, so it's sort of a little bit farther in the distance. This time I'm going to go up to the edit menu and just press paste. You could also shortcut that with Control V, just like you would on our MacBooks. So paste. There it is. This texture looks way too big, so again I'm going to shrink it down to a size where I kind of like the look of it. Now notice I'm not trying to make it exactly the same size as the ball. That's not the goal here. What I'm trying to do is get it to a point where I sort of think the scale of it looks good for the size of this ball. And I'm going to kind of go with that size right there. I'm going to put it right on top of my sphere again and make it invisible by clicking my hide button right there. So this is the layer. Nope, this is the layer that has my sphere on it. So I'm going to put the texture right above that sphere. I don't really have to do that, but in this case, I just feel better about it if I do. So here again is that process. Really simple. Select pixels. Makes a selection perfectly of that sphere. Come to my texture. Turn it back on. Say select, invert selection. So now that selects everything outside my sphere. I'm going to grab my eraser and then simply erase the area around it. Okay, so now I have another perfect texture exactly the same size as my sphere. I'm going to go to select and then deselect. Could also push Control D. Again, I'm going to click my little blending menu right here. In this case, I'm going to choose multiply again, just like I did before, but in this case, I'm going to turn my transparency quite a bit lower so that you just sort of have a hint of that texture, because that sphere is a bit farther away, so I don't need to see quite as much detail in the texture. Okay, that's it, folks. I'm going to pause the video, but then I'm going to add textures to my other ball and also to the ground. So just give me, well, it's not going to take any time for you, because I'm just going to pause. Alright, so I added a texture to all three of my spheres or planets, whatever you want to call them. And then I also found another texture. In this case, it's sort of a sandy, sort of rocky texture, and I'm going to use that for the ground here. So that texture, again, was just on textureking.com. Found the texture, right-click, copy image, pasted it into Pixlr, and there it is. In this case, I'm going to resize it a bit. This one's a little bit easier. All I need to do is grab the top of it up here and shrink it down. Now you'll notice when I try to shrink this down, it doesn't want to let me shrink it straight down. It wants to keep the size the same, so it's squishing it down in the corner. If I hold the Shift key, that changes this option right up here, fixed or free. You can also just click it right up here, and that will allow me to transform this thing in a non-symmetrical manner, or in a non-scaled manner, so that I can make it any size or any shape that I want, instead of being stuck to the exact same shape as the original shape. So I'm just going to squish it down so it's roughly the same height as the ground back there. Okay, and again, I'm going to click my little blending menu right here, adjust my blending mode, to whatever works well for my particular image. In this case, I'm going to probably go with screen, which makes it kind of fade into the background back there. And I'm going to also lower the transparency a little bit so that it's not too strong of a look. So zoom in a little bit, you can see what I've done. So my ground now has a, I'm not going to call it realistic, but an interesting ground texture. Each of the 3 spheres has their own texture on it as well. I didn't do anything with the sky yet, but if you want to, you certainly can. So give this a try. It should definitely be doable at your current skill level. If you get stuck, don't worry. Just go back to the beginning, rewatch those steps again. The main mistake that people are making is not paying attention to your layers. You want to make sure that each layer is completely separate and that you're not putting more than one thing on any given layer. Okay, good luck. If you get stuck, just send me an email.